Pietro and Katja. And Pietro, it's time for your interview.
Yeah, so I'm sure there's a lot of different strands that we could take up, but I was asked to start with the first question about how you did discover citizen science and why it has become so important and fundamental to your research.
Yeah, so the first thing I actually want to say is that this isn't our first encounter. You reminded me this is our second encounter. And I think that's important because our first encounter was at an open science workshop in Vienna. And it was there that we intersected this idea of citizen science with open science. And it's nice to see that we're having this conversation now where that intersection, I think, has evolved. So yeah, regarding my first encounter, so I think it all began in middle school, actually, when I discovered the magic of computer programming. It was amazing. It was like discovering a new power. I could give a machine instructions and it would follow these instructions and do exactly what I wanted it to do. And my friends and I would program these games for each other, very simple games. And I could even create my own games. And then the computer would sometimes beat me at my own games, and in some sense the computer was smarter than I was, but this only worked with certain kinds of games. So you know, one game that I enjoyed was Mastermind, you know, where you have the sequence of colors and you have to guess it with some feedback, and that was very much a symbolic reasoning kind of game. But then when I tried to contemplate programming something like Trivial Pursuit, you know, that would require a massive knowledge base, there was no point in even trying that. That was something that required this world knowledge. And I think this was sort of this sense of disparity between human and machine thinking was heightened when I did this project in high school on computerized speech recognition. And something that's come so easily to humans was so hard to get a machine to do well, especially at that time. And I think still today, you know, Siri still makes mistakes. So so I was enthralled by computers, but I was fascinated also by human behavior. And and I realized if I'd become a computer engineer, I would have ended up living in a cave. I mean, a very cool, technologically advanced cave, but a cave nonetheless. I wanted to also study psychology. And there was this emerging field at the time called cognitive science that combined those interests. And so I enrolled at the University of Rochester, and I started working with these things we called connectionist models, known today as neural networks. And we use those to sort of study human thinking, modeling human thinking in machines, but also as a way to try to figure out how to make computers think in more human-like ways. And this sort of gave rise to this this metaphor for me of neural networks, which was very present because at that time it was sort of the heyday of the internet, but it was pre-web. So the internet was becoming more popular. People were emailing, and I started to think about the internet as sort of a neural network that was connecting all these different human nodes. And that was a fascinating idea, that maybe we could create some kind of global intelligence, but I had no idea how that might work. So then fast forward 15 years, and I discovered this project called Stardust at Home, which was a citizen science project that began in 2006. And in that context, you know, I was excited because it was astronomy, and I was an astronomy geek, and I could actually analyze data that was brought back from a spaceship that flew through the tail of a comet. And this project gave me a hint of what was possible if you combine the strengths of humans and machines in the right way. And there was no fancy AI involved in the Stardust project, but yet it was doing something that no AI system could do at the time, and probably today. So so then I thought, well, what if we actually had fancy AI mixed in with humans? What could we do with that? So I was very excited about combining humans and machines to solve problems. But I felt like the field of human computation, this human in the loop computing, was dominated by computer scientists when computers were only half of the equation. So I wanted to try to bring in behavioral science. And then I realized I spent a few years trying to make it more interdisciplinary. And then I realized I needed to be grounded in a real world project, that I was talking the talk, but I wasn't walking the walk, and that there would be learning that could come from actually building a human computation system. So then I was lucky enough to meet Chris Schaefer at Cornell studying Alzheimer's, and then that's how Stall Catchers came about.
Thanks for pointing out your long encounter, many years of encounter, gradually evolving citizen science in your regard. You were just mentioning, and maybe this is also a good follow-up to what Jakob was saying before, that you have gathered quite a lot of experience by walking the walk, by researching Alzheimer's. And I don't know if all the in the audience are familiar with that. Maybe you just want to give some very brief explanation, but maybe also come to answer what were your learnings from at the crossroad of machine learning and AI more generally, and human interaction?
Yeah, right. Well, so Stall Catchers is of course this game where you're trying to advance Alzheimer's research, and our prototype of Stall Catchers was to take Alzheimer's research data and literally put it into the Stardust at Home platform. And we used Stardust to analyze Alzheimer's data. And that worked so well that the Cornell scientists studying Alzheimer's tried it out and said, even if this doesn't become a successful citizen science project, that's our new interface. We're going to use that in the lab to analyze these data. So we knew we were on the right track with that. It's been an amazing project. I could probably talk about it all day, but I think, in terms of learnings, I think the first thing I learned with the Stall Catchers project experience was humility. And that taught me to listen more. So when we created Stall Catchers, we made some educated guesses and some not so educated guesses about how it should work, and we failed in various ways. And frankly, I owe a debt of gratitude to my colleague Agla Romanowskaite for helping me see the value of parading our failures. At first I thought she simply relished the opportunity to publicly shame me. Okay, I still think that, but doing so does not only convey our humanity, I think it builds trust with the community and creates an opportunity for dialogue. And when there's dialogue, there's hope and there's learning. The other thing I learned has to do with the difference between machines and humans. So machines, do what they're told. My mother would disagree with that. But humans, on the other hand, tend to do what they want. And I've learned that that human motivation is a key issue. So when you need human cognition to be a reliable computer, that introduces a whole new set of challenges. And I call the way I think about this behavioral physics. So, like a human at rest tends to stay at rest, right? I guess that sort of makes the sofa kind of gravity well. Maybe that's taking the metaphor too far. But the main point is that when you have multiple stakeholders with different goals and you need them all to engage in different ways, your first question should not be, how do I get everyone to do what I want? Your first question should be, what does everyone already want to do? And from there, you create opportunities that make it easier for them to do those things. And indeed, my general approach to problem solving in life has incorporated these learnings. And let's just say you would hate to be one of my children.
Interesting. Well, we might discuss this another time. I think and we have used quite some time already, so maybe let's go into a particular point that I would be interested in from your learnings, which brings me to the question about ethical standards, right? And the question on, especially when I think what you explain on what the opportunities are by combining in this way our knowledge on artificial intelligence and humans, for example, or human interactional behavior, I would think immediately, oh, cool. So this would be a very interesting way of making artificial intelligence also more open, more explainable, more transparent, to see how it works, kind of to put a lot of different lenses on it. But also I can imagine with this kind of research, we are very, very, very soon coming to the limits of what typical traditional ethical standards can do for us in this kind of research, and also what in institutional review boards can do in terms of when it comes to allowing such projects to happen. What are your experiences here?
Right. So, I mean, this is, of course, something for the community to I think respond to as well, and that's going to be the focus of this side event on citizen science ethics this Friday. But in my own recent experiences with IRB applications for 2 different citizen science projects, my sense is that there are some traditional standards that still apply and some that don't. But I think the important thing is what this shows us, which is that the ethics can evolve with society and context. Some ethics might change. Some become less relevant, and then sometimes we need new ethics to address completely new situations that we haven't anticipated. But what if we had a community-driven process by which those standards could evolve? So we're interested in this. And among other things, this takes pressure off our community of getting it perfectly right the first time around, as we're trying to come up with a set of values and ethics that we all want to stand by. We know it's not going to be right the first time. So instead of drafting some immutable list of ethics that requires 100% consensus from our community, we can seed a list of ethics with the expectations that they'll evolve with citizen science practice. And as part of an initiative we're developing toward improved sustainability in citizen science, the Human Computation Institute is actually partnering with some world-class IRB experts who will be at the side event, by the way, to reinvent ethical review for citizen science. So it's transparent rather than opaque. It's collaborative rather than adversarial, and I think most importantly, it's dynamic. It can evolve with context and learning and input from the community.
But that immediately brings me to that question: don't we need some kind of sandbox playgrounds to experiment here as well?
Right. So yeah, and I think so in advancing the science of citizen science, and I think this very much intersects with what Jacob was describing. Jacob and I recently rediscovered each other, and we're excited to be collaborating. There's an opportunity to now create an environment in which experimentation can be very fluid and easy to do. So when I was 17 years old, I got a summer job selling cutlery, and I was not very good at this, but I kept trying. So one day I went on a sales call to this house, and they actually ended up purchasing some cutlery for me. And I was so excited that as I backed out of their driveway, I ran over their fence. So here's what happened. The father said, "You have 2 choices. You can either buy me a new fence or you can fix it." And since the total sum of my money at that moment was what I had just earned from the sale of the cutlery, I decided my best option was to fix the fence. And this began a week-long project. And so the first thing I did was assess the damage. There were bent and broken pieces. And so I said, "Where's the nearest hardware store?" So eventually I found the hardware store. There was no GPS back then, the dark ages. Turns out they didn't have all the parts I needed, and the parts they did have were the wrong size or shape. So I went back to the father and I explained what happened, and he told me about another hardware store that was farther away but had more parts. So I went there, I found other parts I needed that were also not quite right. So by this time, I think the father was sort of equal parts exasperated and amused, and so he gave me the name and address of a machinist who could rethread some of the metal parts and make everything fit together. So I found this person and thus began another adventure. And in the end, I did rebuild the fence, and I learned a very valuable lesson: never become a data scientist. And so these are the same challenges that we face in data science. And if you do citizen science today, you're in one way or another intersecting with these challenges of data science, which is both, how to make all the parts fit together and how to get all the parts to come together. And that means getting all the people to come together. And that's what we're working on.
Okay.
Thank you.